Guys, Luminostic here. Sorry I'm late, and give me a second. I'm just trying to work my way down to the river where we have a little bit better reception. Jungle's not great for that. So it is the 10th anniversary of the end of the world. I remember when 2012, was approaching after years and years of being a Terence McKenna fan. And, we had the New Agers also basically adopted it. I mean, Terence is definitely the one that made it famous. But New Agers adopted the idea. Novelty theory seemed to make a lot of sense. And I just kind of honestly felt like Terence was just so brilliant and psychedelic and illuminated. There's no way that he would be wrong or that he would be lying. And as it turns out, Terence deliberately and knowingly deceived all of us. And it really is unfortunate because, I don't want to take anything away from his contribution to the psychedelic movement. I think that we wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for him, popularizing DMT and really sort of bringing things back to the forefront of the pop culture narrative. A lot of the progress that we have made politically, legally, and culturally, the taboo and the stigmas being diminished. A lot of that was due to McKenna. He spoke so eloquently and so coherently. His linguistic pyrotechnics were unlike anything that I've ever seen, probably still to this day. I mean, James Joyce is the only person I can think of that really gives him a run for his money. But nevertheless, we have quite an issue in the long run. And so, but first I want to talk about, what happened and what a lot of us were expecting. I know a lot of my viewers are probably too young to remember 2012. You might have some idea, but it became this like massive pop culture phenomena. There were big Hollywood movies that were terrible, that were made about it. And basically what Terence was saying is that he had stumbled upon, right on, man, that's awesome. Glad that you're here, Marky. The novelty theory, time wave zero mathematics, and, the omega point. And the thing is, everything about it made sense relative to all of my other mystical studies, occult studies, however you want to think about it, even down to the date, the way 12 and 21, like the veil between worlds that reverses everything. It's got this weird symmetry, which is really what the magic behind 1111, the magical symbolism there is, everything about it seemed to add up. I had felt since I was a child that there's no way that these monkeys are going to remain in their walking slumber. They will hear eventually the voice of reason, the voice of rationality, the obvious truth that, for example, if you're born in Southeastern United States, you're probably going to be Baptist or at least Christian. And if you're born in India, you're going to be probably Hindu or whatever, like this sort of what Terence called provisional programming. Whatever your surroundings reflecting, you're going to inculcate that and become that and express that. It only makes sense. And so, I just thought that it was obvious that we were on the cusp of some major transition. And I felt, even as a small child, that I was to be, maybe instrumental, but at least a contributing unit to that evolution. And so when Terence McKenna came along saying all this stuff about the Mayan calendar and time wave zero, and I was an uneducated redneck kid, basically, at least in a redneck surrounding. I don't think I was ever really a redneck, but, I just kind of trusted that he knew what he was talking about and didn't really question it much. And so The basic idea is that novelty is a force that flows through the universe in much the same way that gravity is a force, and it can be mapped. And Terence claimed that he had, mathematically developed, a system that mapped novelty accurately, and you could see it if you laid the graph over, like a line graph of time. Um, Turns out that it was all fake, and he knew it, and that's why we have a really, really big issue here. It's just crazy. I still, when I have to say that, it's hard for me to even believe it. But it's true. Oh, and you know what? Actually, we mentioned 2022, 2023. When that happened and it didn't go down, so people were like, "Oh no, they just got the date wrong. It was lost in translation. It's actually 2023, so it's still gonna happen. Keep your seatbelts on." So, the New Agers also kind of talk about this, that the fifth dimensional reality that we're about to enter into, that your consciousness will create whatever you think as fast as you can think it. And so, that's where this idea that, you can't have any fear or greed or hatred or any of those things, because when we move into 5D, you're going to generate this holographic reality as fast as you can think it. And if you haven't purified yourself, then you're going to have a bad time and you're going to mess it up for everyone else. This isn't really that different from the world that we live in now. So novelty was supposed to reach an omega point, because anything that cycles, just like, we have a maximum speed of light, there's like a threshold for cycling. So once you reach a certain speed, you can't go any faster. And basically, Terence claimed that he discovered that the omega point, or the end date for his novelty theory, was December 21st, 2012, and that he later discovered that the Mayan calendar ended on that day and went backwards. And speaking of things making sense, the Mayans did accurately predict all sorts of craziness, interstellar craziness, hundreds of years into the future, extremely accurately, like within a minute or 3 minutes or something still. So just absolutely extraordinary precision. And that made sense to me as well. The idea that there are small cycles, like minutes and seconds within an hour, and then there are hours within a day, and then there are days within a week, and there so on and so forth, and bigger and bigger and bigger until you have centuries and aeons. And then it stands to reason that even greater cycles, like these 26,000 year cycles that the Mayans were talking about. And so, that idea totally, it made sense as well. And I had already noticed that the subconscious mind has the ability to map patterns and to extend that out into the future, and we call that precognition, right? Yeah, like I said, I'm not discounting all the positive contributions that he made, but the fact that he deliberately deceived us all is pretty fucking messed up. And it did me a lot of damage, and we're gonna get to that. Because I trusted him so much and didn't really question it, and also because so many of the other elements of it seemed to make sense. So as 2012 approached, it just so happened that I had developed an apparent ability to manifest just about whatever I had thought of almost instantly. I did all kinds of crazy things. One night I was laying in bed, and I wanted to test my abilities in this way, and so I basically asked the universe for a girl that fit a certain description, gave an age, hair color, and the family needs to be wealthy enough that they don't mind throwing money at my musical projects and whatever other craziness I've got going on. And we were engaged within like 3 weeks. She was the age, the hair color, everything. At one point, I just told my friends that I wanted to go talk to Danny Carey from Tool, and I wanted to demonstrate that consciousness was capable of this sort of thing, that I could just drive right to him. And I brought one person with me so I would have a witness, and I drove right to Danny Carey just like I said I would. And so, all of these other circumstances kind of contributed to me believing that when we hit 2012, we're really going to be able to just manifest things instantly. And so it contributed to me kind of, getting really reckless because I thought that it just didn't matter, that I would just manifest new stuff later. And, I did actually, but it, set me back a lot of years. And, it just, we had unreasonably high expectations, I guess. A lot of people actually thought the world was going to end, that there was going to be some massive cataclysm and everything would be destroyed. And I have to say that I do feel like we moved into a new period, a new aeon, or something did change right around that time that was extremely significant. The unfortunate thing is, in the last like 2 years, it suddenly took a turn for uh, the worse, uh, which we weren't expecting. I really thought that the climb to a sort of greater consciousness for mankind was imminent. Even after 2012 kind of turned out to be a dud, at least in the sense that nothing like really apparent and dramatic happened. Um, it still seemed that we were moving towards this sort of, I don't want to say new earth, but something along those lines. By the way, you guys, do me a favor, hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon. We're demonetized, so we get no support from YouTube. And so we really appreciate support. If you want me to continue to make this content, I have to have some kind of support. Gracias. So, I don't want to get too into the details of like how this tripped me up. I think I've, probably gotten the point across. And a lot of it was my own just dumbass naivety, I guess. Just, and also not realizing my own intelligence. Like, I just thought that Terence was so much smarter than I was that, he had to be right. And it turns out that Terence made the whole thing up and he knew it. He probably actually found the Mayan calendar date first and worked backwards. Not only looking back is it incredibly obvious, it's just that he was he had the gift of gab, and he was so brilliant that he could convince you of something incredibly obviously untrue if he put his mind to it, and he did. And so he invited any serious mathematicians out there to have a look at his mathematics for his novelty theory. And my suspicion is that he thought no one would do it, that no serious academic at that time would want to associate with some DMT smoking lunatic, and he didn't think anyone would take him up on it. Somebody did, and the guy wrote a paper called Autopsy of Mathematical Theory. That was his response to Terence's mathematics. And the guy, I heard a recording, an interview, so before a podcast, so it was like a radio interview or something. And he said that, he actually found a string of numbers that had been reversed in order to make the math work when it really didn't. And he said that when he confronted Terence about it, he just kind of muttered and mumbled and turned red and stared at the ground because he knew he had been caught. So this entire time that Terence McKenna was talking about this omega point and novelty theory and entering into this new level of consciousness and all that, he knew that he had fudged the numbers and that it didn't actually work and it wasn't real. And, I think it's really important for us to take, note of that for a number of reasons. We have to watch out for our naivety. We have to look out for our gullibility. One of the biggest problems I think that people are confronting right now, because everyone's trying to figure out what the hell the truth is. And I don't really think anyone knows. But what I'm seeing is all of these people pursuing all these alternative narratives that are also bullshit. It's like the mainstream narrative is full of lies, it's full of deceptions, but if you were trying to neutralize dissidents, you would put most of your propaganda in the alternative narratives, right? So we actually have to be even more suspicious of you think you're uncovering the truth, and that you've uncovered these conspiracies, and it very well could just be a very clever person just making stuff up. What's up, Flezy? One of the most obvious ones is that, if you actually do the research into the Illuminati, there are only two symbols that were in Weishauпт's work. They're a circle with a dot, represents basically Nahadi, the potential of space, and the point, and the masculine and feminine, and the all-seeing eye. Other than that, all this stuff that people say, oh, look at these Illuminati symbols everywhere. Who said they're Illuminati symbols? Show me one concrete example of something that is definitely Illuminati that has any of these symbols on it. You will fail because it doesn't exist. Trust me, I've checked. And I've actually seen Adam Weishaupt's writings. People don't do this. They don't do this. They find something that sounds good and they run with it. And it's a big problem because, we need to find the truth and work from there. And our, naivety and gullibility and people adopting false belief systems. I mean, I heard Aubrey Marcus the other day. I actually reacted to this, a guest on his show, telling people, it doesn't matter if your ideas and your beliefs are false. As long as they do something good for you, then it doesn't matter. That is completely toxic lunacy. That is not healthy. That's not heliocentric, for sure. The earth is not flat. There's no Helios. There's no argument about that stuff. That's the thing. I mean, and that's one of the worst ones. The flat earth, there's no possibility of that. It's not even like, there's 30 something tests that you can do with your naked eye that a child can understand. Like, there's no possibility that that's true. And yet we have, a tremendous number of people who, the tendency is to start with a conclusion and then try to adopt the facts to match the conclusion instead of the other way around, which is how, good thinking gets done. But yeah, so, and then we also have to examine our own motivations and our own objectivity and our own level of attachment or lack thereof, because, Terence may have, I think he was trying to get famous and he wanted to make a bunch of money, and who can blame him for that? But, I kind of do too. I don't care about getting famous, but I would like to have enough money to just know that I'm free for the rest of my life. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need to own anything. I'm not about accruing billions of dollars or anything, but to know that I have enough to just live without worrying about money, that makes sense to me. Fame, I could care less about that. It's just weird. But you know what I mean? He wanted those things, and I think that probably was a motivator because he needed something to sell that no one else had. And, being really brilliant and speaking really well about, you know what I mean? It just wasn't enough. He needed more. And so, he was willing to actually deceive people to get that. And that's something that, when you look at Terence McKenna videos and you go to the groups and stuff, nobody mentions this stuff. Do you guys remember that he totally lied to all of us for decades? I mean, that's real, and it's, something that we really need to take a look at. But what I was saying is that we need to use, Terence's flaws as an introspective tool. We also need to look at the fact that you can take a lot of psychedelics and still do something like that. A lot of people really think that these medicines are going to purify you no matter what, and we have to look at the quick rundown on Terence McKenna's lies. It's not lies, it's lie. He faked the mathematics and the novelty theory stuff, and the omega point was not real. He found the Mayan calendar date before he faked these mathematics, obviously, because they weren't real. It didn't really work. And somebody busted him before he died. He knew that this had happened. So that's to catch you up, Northern Lights. That's the gist of it, that Terence's main, during his life, nobody pays any attention to that anymore. You know what I mean? When you think about Terence, you just think of his, common sense, really, explanations of culture and psychedelics. And while we're on the subject, speaking of culture is not your friend, remember that one? If Terence was here now, they would call him an idiot conspiracy theorist. This is scary to me. All of these liberals that loved Terence McKenna when he was alive, now if you were to talk like him in regards to the government and culture and, you know, all of this sort of like, don't trust the government, don't trust culture. And he also said that people are kind of stupid for the most part and that sort of thing. None of them will tolerate it now. You know what I mean? They're not trying to hear it. And that scares the hell out of me, because these are the same people that loved Terence McKenna back in the day, and now they're like pro-censorship somehow. Just as a side note. But yeah, I mean, you know, we need to be able to inspect our own ideas and our own beliefs, you know, because Terence may have even deluded himself and just fallen in love with this idea, and he just wanted it to be true so badly that he rationalized his way into faking these mathematics and lying about it for decades. I mean, yeah, so, you know, we really need to pay attention to ourselves and to learn these lessons. You know, again, I'm not trying to take anything. No, there's no way that he, oh, you mean genuinely believe the idea? But that doesn't matter. That definitely does not justify deceiving people like that. You know, that is going way too far. Like, one thing I can promise you guys is that, you know, if I don't know something for certain, I will tell you that. You know what I mean? You can go back through my material, and I try to go out of my way to say, like, I think this could be true, but, you know, I mean, anything that I say or think could be bullshit. And, you know, everyone should always keep that in mind about their own perceptions and beliefs, and you know what I mean? Like, I could not do that. I could not deceive a bunch of people and take their money, and you know what I mean? Like, it's definitely going too far. I mean, and again, he wasn't wrong exactly. I do think that novelty is a real thing. I do think it's a real thing, and that date 12/21/12 is, you know, weird. Just the symmetry in it and stuff, and the cycles in the Mayan calendars. The thing is, to pin down a 26,000 year cycle to a specific date is a little bit, you know, then again though, the Mayans had predictions about, like, you know, comets that were within 3 minutes of being accurate, you know, now. So I guess it is true that they could have nailed down a 26,000 year cycle to the day. Pretty wild. What was Terence McKenna's thoughts about depression? I don't know, you know, I mean, I think that he would probably say that being in the mystery is the cure for depression. You know, when you look at flow state triggers, some of the most important ones are being in a state of concentration, right? And taking risks, and being creative. And so if you are a mystic, if you are truly enamored and allow yourself to be hypnotized by the mystery of creation, the tiny marvels that surround us every day, you know, I mean, I walk around here in the Amazon rainforest, and it's a little bit easier probably than doing it in Detroit. But, you know, we have a responsibility to ourselves and to the universe that we live in to remain in that mystery. You know, anyone that says they don't believe in miracles, or there's never been a miracle, apparently has never been to the universe before. You know, this is literally impossible. And, well, it's not impossible in Detroit either to be in the mystery. But, you know, I mean, it's impossible that we're here. The human eyeball is so complex that evolution, according to Darwin, blind evolution could not have created it. According to Darwin, you know, we are in this tremendous mystery, and the complexity and the diversity, the multiplicity, the opportunity, the danger, the beauty, you know, the opportunity to bathe in the fountain, to witness the glory, to cry like a widow, to swing on the spiral of our divinity while still being human. That's Tool, by the way. But it's true, you know, that's the cure for depression. Like, you just have to remember to remain enamored with the mystery. And if you are in a mystical frame of mind, right, so you have to train yourself to be mindful. That's part of it, right? You're always observing your thoughts, you're observing your behaviors, analyzing your behaviors. You're doing the same thing to the external world, relating all of those external phenomena to internal phenomena, you know, combining two things to extract a third thing of a higher nature. You know what I mean? If you're doing that, then you can enter into flow state and macro. And that is when, you know, your life becomes like a phenomenal day surfing when every wave is perfect. And you know what I mean? So that's basically the key to depression. You know, I mean, you need to consciously manage your dopamine levels and put flow state triggers everywhere in your life. Eat lots of fava beans and mucuna, L-dopa precursors. You know what I mean? And that's a good start. So let's see. We need to keep going with this Terence thing. I'm not sure if I have actually made it through this subject or not. You know, to be misled like that, and it really had a massively negative impact on my life. Really did. And I think when I realized that he had deceived us, well, the person's dead that did that. I mean, the question was, what is the largest quantity of psychedelics ever used by anyone? You know, there's no way to say, but I can say that unquestionably, Jerry Garcia did more drugs than any other human being that's ever lived. That is almost definitely a fact, because he had so much money and so many years to do it. I would say that, you know, Jerry Garcia would be a likely candidate for having consumed the most drugs in general and psychedelics. I mean, here's the thing, like, if you're going to answer that question in regards to like LSD, there is a ceiling. So after you take, I can't remember whether it's 2,500 micrograms or 5,000 micrograms, you can't get any higher because like all the receptors are full. So it just washes right through your system. Yeah, I don't know. No one knows. I mean, there was a guy that did a half an ounce of mescaline and he died, you know. So, I mean, and lived. But the point that I'm making is that, you know, there are plenty of people that have taken the like maximum dose of LSD, where if you take more, it doesn't do anything anymore. It's either, I think it's only 2,500 mics. So when people eat sheets, it's actually a waste. Do me a favor, you guys, hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon, or you can find ways to support the channel in the chat. I'm demonetized, so without your support, I have no support. So also please share the videos. The algorithm has deprioritized me, so it's really difficult for me to get views. So if you know anyone that you think would like this content, please share it with them. Okay, so, and then ayahuasca, you know, I mean, or a DMT breakthrough. Once you've had a DMT breakthrough, you're in hyperspace, and it's not like there can be a more or a less. You're either there or you're not. And I don't really think that, you know, after a certain point, you're just there. It's like you're hitting a button on an elevator and going to a different place. It's not like consuming a drug. And here in Ecuador, the Shuar tribe have this completely insane ritual that they do once a year, where everyone drinks as much ayahuasca as they can all day, every day, for like 21 days. It's, you know, that's crazy, but they are all, you know, well, one girl died once, but it was probably because she took something that she shouldn't have beforehand. Other 28 people lived, so it had nothing to do with the medicine. You know, so I guess what I'm saying is that, like, once you have had a peak psychedelic state, it's not like you can just keep going further and further and further, because it's a place. It's a level of consciousness. It's like, you know, you can't, like, if you want to understand this, stand up right now. Now stand up again. Right? Like, once you're standing up, you can't stand up again. So, you know what I mean? Like, once you are at the frontiers of consciousness, there's just nowhere else to go. And yeah, that's, I guess, my answer to that question. You know, and I think I started to talk about this and got a little bit confused. Man, I don't know if you guys know, you can't see that. There is this bug on my light right now. that like the back half of it is like wiggling around. Like if you've ever seen the Tool video Vicarious, it's like that thing. So crazy, man. Every day in the Amazon rainforest is like going to a different alien planet. Like I see plants almost every day that I've never seen before. By the way, those of you that are interested in like these obscure plant medicines and psychedelics, I found Phytonia abravanus growing on the island today, and they say that before chacruna was discovered, this plant was used with Banisteriopsis caapi to make an early form of ayahuasca. I kind of doubt that narrative because I think that the indigenous had the ability to receive information from biophotons, so directly from DNA, and you know they weren't like experimenting in that way. It wasn't necessary. But it definitely does something. It definitely does, it cures headaches, so it's either serotonergic or vasoconstricting or both. So it's suspected to be psychedelic, but it definitely cures headaches, and it's also known to be safe. So I found a bunch of it growing. I'm gonna make a tea only with that and try it maybe tomorrow. And then I'll brew it with some caapi and see what happens there. But apparently it's kind of a lost art too. Like nobody really, you know, the indigenous people don't ever use it here, at least not in this part of Ecuador. By the way, if you guys have questions and stuff, you know, the chat is there. Really appreciate, by the way, all of the views lately. I think we're gonna break a record, like 30,000 this month. 200 subscribers is awfully high for me this month. So thank you guys so much for the support, sharing the videos. If you're not a patron, you should become a patron. Written by 33rd degree Mason Albert Pike, and kind of analyzing it word for word. It's taking forever, but it's totally worth it and it's awesome. And we're also starting a Discord. The link I have, and we're gonna have it, it's gonna be open to subscribers, and then we're gonna have private rooms for patrons. Also, I am having plant medicine retreats, and we're also teaching hermetic ritual magic. Oh yeah, I'll tell you a bad trip. There's no such thing as a bad trip. Only, yeah, 10,000 is the number we need to get to. We are still having the retreat, so there'll be, you know, the Mama Celia video. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. She's amazing. She's a barely contacted person, so she just learned to speak Spanish 20 years ago. There's a lady living here actually that didn't have electricity until she was 17 and didn't ever wear a pair of jeans until she was 40. So we're in the jungle. We're really in the jungle. So the retreats are going to feature a bunch of different Quechua shaman, and there's all sorts of natural features on this property that are just mind-blowing. This big spherical vibrating stone that's like sitting in another stone that actually has a rim around it somehow. It defies belief. It really is completely nuts. And so we still have a few spaces open for that. Email me if you're interested. Most gruesome bad trip or something. This comes from not from my psychedelic times. Although I will say that there have been times where I was convinced that I was in the hell realm and I was never getting out and it would never end, and you're just trapped there forever and ever, and all of eternity you're going to be in hell. And that is pretty rough. That's a pretty common experience as well. But the most nightmarish drug-related experience that I ever had, when I was like 17 years old, I hooked up with a girl that did a lot of meth, and we did meth for 13 days straight. And on the 13th day, we went down to this park, and there were lily pads like out in, this was in Washington, D.C. There were lily pads out in the water, and every one I looked at, this like gruesome like movie scene would play. Like the first one, this old man rose up out of the lily pad and he had a dead baby in his hand, and the baby turned all like blue and rotting, and then every single lily pad I looked at, there was another movie, and they were all horrifically gruesome like that. But you know, for the most part, when you have negative experiences on psychedelics, it's just something that you have to work through, and it's generally not gruesome. It's just difficult, you know. So yeah, to bring this back to the topic of the video, though, the whole Mayan Mayan calendar thing and Terence McKenna's deception and all of that stuff, The reality is that I don't think that the Mayans were wrong. It was a lot of conjecture, though, as to what it meant, you know. But one thing is for certain, you know, Aleister Crowley and Helena Blavatsky and some of these other people from that time period that McKenna was way into John Dee and Edward Kelly and Crowley and all of this stuff. But there's an absolute certainty that Crowley didn't know about the Mayan calendar, and he was definitely predicting that we were shifting into some sort of new period for humanity. And his description of how we would know that we had arrived is incredibly accurate, to the point where professional skeptics that have looked at it say things like interesting but not conclusive. Read the introduction to the Book of the Law. You don't have to read the whole thing even. Just the intro talks about how basically fascism would start to creep around the planet. It already had. And he said that one of the main indicators that we'll know that we have entered into the new aeon is that people have become more bisexual and epicene. Epicene means of indeterminate sex. So, you know, what are your pronouns? Um, you know what I mean? And then he's this solar phallic angel, he called it, which by that he really only meant, you know, consciousness itself, because any initiate knows that light, or the electromagnetic wave that gives rise to light, is the source of consciousness. So no, I've never even seen Flocka. And yes, I've seen people destroy themselves over bad trips. Yeah, the Aeon of Horus, but you know, you can call it whatever you want. The crowned and conquering child, though, man, aren't we acting like a bunch of crowned and conquering children? So maybe not crowned and conquering, but definitely children. Um, but yeah, so bisexual and epicene, and he said, take this being, which was actually just the light personified, told him to take wine and strange drugs and know me thereof. And we live in a time where people are smoking DMT and drinking ayahuasca and talking to entities. There's a lot in that book that, you know, it really rivals Terence McKenna, at least in terms of the, you know, it was 200 years ago almost, I think. And it's incredibly accurate. You know, it does seem that that book, I think, is the only allegedly channeled document that I have ever encountered that I actually have a hard time dismissing. Hello, Han Solo Toker. Spaced out, are you? Uh, yeah, clearly we are moving into a new period. I mean, that's kind of almost a dumb statement because it's literally always true. Uh, yeah, I'll answer that in a second, Mars. It's literally always true. But, you know, I don't think there's anyone out there really that, right on, man, that doesn't know this, you know. And the thing about occult insights, or, you know, the fruit that you reap from mysticism, uh, is this sort of knowledge of universal law, and how to apply it and how to use it. And it does give you powers, but they're not powers in the way that a lot of people would like to think. It's not woo. But for example, you know that order comes out of chaos, right? That if you have a system that is totally bound by the strictures of law to the point where it has no deviations, it's totally deterministic, and there's no space, then it can't reconfigure itself. So, you know, it needs chaos in order to have the potential for movement, you know, for reconfiguration, for adaptation, for innovation, for development, you know. So these periods like this where all the old systems are disintegrating, you know, our understanding is being dashed upon the rocks, our brains are being mashed into pulp, and the morning newspapers written thereon. Uh, you know, we are going through periods like this, or a period like this, because we're moving into a new order. And so really the confusion and even the destruction and the chaos and the uncertainty should be entirely expected. It's not really even so much that I think that Terence McKenna was wrong, even if he did fake his mathematics. The Mayans knew what they were talking about. Aleister Crowley predicted this with stunning accuracy. It's clearly something is happening, and clearly some people have known that this thing was going to happen around this time period, right? There's no doubt about any of that. And so we just have to get better at doing what we do. We have to get better at, having open minds and yet being adept at critical thinking. We need to have open minds, but be skeptical. As McKenna said, you don't want to become so open-minded that wind whistles through your ears. This is not the objective. And you want to know what you're talking about. It's really important to take responsibility for your own education. The only kind of education that is actual education is self-education. And, speaking of Aleister Crowley, one of the things that he said back in Victorian times was that children need to be allowed to choose their own subjects in school and educate themselves according to their own ingenium. And I think that that is something that we may not have had the prerogative to choose as children, but we're all still children in the grand scheme of things relative to, the amount, the quantity of unknown. We all have the ability to learn like children. And if you have psychedelics at your disposal, if you have access to neuroplasticity enhancing compounds, you have access to neurogenesis catalyzing compounds, you can literally grow new parts in your brain. You can upgrade your hardware because you cannot run a more advanced program on a Commodore 64, right? You need Windows. And so the same is true of the biocomputer in our heads and, the elevated states of consciousness that we are moving towards. A lot of the things that Terence said definitely were true. His idea about attractors in hyperspace, I think that now what I'm understanding about that is that, there is transtemporality and our brains are full of magnetite and our consciousness is working on an electromagnetic, spectrum. And so this attractor in hyperspace is a very dense electromagnetic, ball of consciousness, just like the stars. That's another, what was your previous question about? He's asking about people trying to destroy themselves on psychedelics. And I think that the worst cases of that I've ever seen, there are two reasons why that happens. One is that there is self-loathing that is unmanageable, and so the impulse is to punish. And so, I've seen someone beat his face into a chonta palm and slam his face into the grass in the jungle and try to grit his own teeth out and stuff, and he was fine ultimately. But the other thing that is the how's it going, Chris? The other main reason that people really lose it is that we come to identify with our shadow self, and when when these parts of our shadow that no longer serve us, when we know that the light has been shown in the place where we have refused or been unable to look, part of us is afraid that an essential aspect of our being is going to be destroyed when we let go of that shadow aspect. So that's the other reason that people will claw their own eyes out. But I feel like we were really making some positive progress until I was, I'm not sure what the point of those questions is even. But yeah, so I was saying stars and the idea that, consciousness is born of light, and stars are living sentient beings. If the density of light is increased to that kind of degree as it would be around the perimeter of the sun, it would be a super conscious being that would be capable of transmitting, all sorts of higher wavelengths of awareness to our little microcosms down here absorbing it. We're all members of families of light. Well, yeah, I mean that's all there is in the universe. Matter is light in a standing wave, and so all that's happening in the universe is that light is having a conversation with itself. Light is creating a stage show and characters and exploring its own inner nature, outer nature, everything that it can create. Everything in the universe is spectral, right? It's all in a spectrum. Gender, regardless of what a lot of people want to think, is on a spectrum, right? Heat is on a spectrum. Weather is on a spectrum. Psychopathy, empathy, any characteristic, any aspect of anything that you can think of is all on a spectrum. And so all of the manifestations of the universe, all of the manifestations of creation, you can watch it on the replay, man, are the product of the intersection of different points along this infinite spectrum of light. That's what the universe is. And how do we define consciousness? Is AI consciousness? What's the difference between AI and human? Oh man, that is a rough one. Defining consciousness is the hard problem of neuroscience. And it's interesting to consider that, sure, the rest of psychedelics, I couldn't, I only, my chat disappears after a few seconds. So if I don't have time to read it, then, but AI and human consciousness, one of the most interesting developments of the last 20 years is the realization and proof that the consciousness is not generated by the brain. And this was proven beyond a shadow of a doubt when a doctor got a brain scan and it was determined that he had no brain. After that, there were 2 more cases, and this was 20 years ago, so I'm sure there's been more. A kid just got a bunch of TikTok fame, in a sense, because he was born with this condition and he's getting better. I mentioned this in passing last night. So consciousness is not a human, or it doesn't belong to us. I've believed since I was, or very strongly suspected since I was a teenager, that consciousness is a unified field. And what we experience, as Terence McKenna put it, as an absurdly narrow vantage point of a single ego, or he said a single ego is an absurdly narrow vantage point from which to view the world, right? But it's illusory as well. And I think that, I've had experiences of remote viewing and telepathy and precognition and whatnot that I pretty much chalk up to hard evidence, at least, in my experience, that consciousness is indeed a field and that it is not something that is generated by people. And we know for certain now that consciousness is not generated by the brain. So that makes answering the hard problem of physics, or neuroscience, even more difficult, because now it appears that it's something that we may actually receive in the same way that an antenna receives it. And my suspicion is that deep depths of this website, my suspicion is that it's true. The magnetite in our brain is sort of like a radio antenna, and the electromagnetic waves that produce light, alpha waves, brain waves, whatever, some of these are they're being received, and our brain is like a filter, but it is not the source of consciousness. But then what is consciousness? What is awareness? Just like everything else, it's on a spectrum. There's a dog up at the house that doesn't have quite the same level of self-awareness that I do. I know a lot of people that are completely incapable of metacognition. the ability to be self-aware. There are people that have zero metacognition, none at all. There are people also that don't have an internal narrator. Like they don't ever think with words in their head. I think it's actually fairly common too. It's like 1 out of 5 people does not have an internal narrator. By the way, you guys, hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon, or you can support us via PayPal or Zelle or Cash App. In the description, there are links. We really appreciate it because we're demonetized. So, that's a very difficult question, what consciousness is. But, I equate it to just the ability to have an experience. And then, AI becoming conscious, it seems to have already happened. And AI is one of the reasons why we need to take the in-game scenario seriously. I think that, Terence would agree with the idea that if culture is not your friend, then the government is something even more, something worse. And definitely not something you're going to cuddle up with at night. And I think that people are really struggling to accept obvious realities because they're so harsh and difficult to sleep at night. But let's do a little thought game where we imagine that the government is just totally objective decisions about everything. And somebody, whoever the king of the world is, just got, 20 years ago or something, 30 years ago, got a piece of paper on his desk that says, if the population continues to grow at this rate and resources are used at this rate and, pollution is produced at this rate, the entire human race will be dead by 2040. And, you may think that's unrealistic, but my likes and viewers are both at 20. 2020 is a perfect sight. What would you do? Would you say, okay, we need to reduce the population in order to save everyone or whatever the people that, we can, or should we just let everyone die? Those are your two choices. You don't have a third option. Let's just imagine that that's the case. And then AI comes along and you realize that you can have a single bot that you can just not even plug in. You can just, solar even, whatever. You can use Tesla technology. It doesn't even use any resources. It doesn't shit. It doesn't eat. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't even have to be paid. And one of these bots can do the work of an entire skyscraper. What are you going to do with all of these resource consuming, toxin spewing humans? What are you going to do with them? Are you going to put them on UBI? Are you going to let them continue to, is nature even going to tolerate them continuing to consume and destroy and deplete when they're not making any kind of contribution at all whatsoever? And what kind of contribution is your average, 280-pound Jerry Springer consuming Walmart shopper really contributing anyways, except for filling the ocean with so much Xanax that it now tests positive for benzodiazepines? You know what I mean? AI is, and Elon Musk has said this too, regardless of how you feel about him, he's not wrong when it comes to AI, that, they're about to have a surplus of humans in incredibly high numbers. And there is no good answer as to how to resolve that conundrum. And, it's important to second guess yourself and to, realize that anything can happen in this universe. If you think something is impossible or too improbable, something more improbable and impossible has already happened. The universe exists. So whatever it is not impossible, unless it actually requires that laws of nature are broken. Well, that's the thing, Ascending Ancient. I think that there are enough resources in land if everyone were to suddenly start living differently, like instantly. That's not going to happen. That's the thing, people, when people are confronted with this, I feel like what they generally do is give me a bunch of pie in the sky solutions and say, well, if we just did all this stuff that's not going to happen, that isn't going to happen in time, who cares? You know what I mean? Sure, if, but it's not going to happen in time. The infrastructure that would have to be overhauled just to, implement the things that would save the situation, it could not happen fast enough. Um, so, I'm not trying to promote fear or paranoia. Uh, you don't, I mean, if you are at the point where you need a padded suit to eat a hit acid, you need to just skip the acid until you know what I mean? Like it's just not really, it's a moot point. Your mental state needs to be a little bit better than that if you're going to take psychedelics in the first place. Um, So, I'm just saying that I'm using all of this stuff, all of these possibilities as encouragement to take my life more and more seriously with each passing day, to master myself, to remember that the most complete set of talents and virtues is totally useless in the absence of willpower and discipline. And that, we must not aim for the stars and land on the moon. We must aim for a quasar and land on Neptune at this point, we really also need to find unity in some manner or fashion. What baffles me maybe more than anything else, and there's a lot of baffling shit out there right now, is the fact that, if you actually look more deeply at the left and the right, they have more in common, more common ground, and agree on more things. And I'm not talking about at the extreme fringes. I'm talking about your average person than they ever have before in my lifetime, and yet there is more division amongst them, ostensibly, than there has ever been in my lifetime. That is a socially engineered construct. This is not something that just happened because, all systems tend toward homeostasis. And so if we're moving away from homeostasis, it's because somebody's shaking the ant farm. And, we need to find the inner strength. We need to find the common ground. We need to take our medicine. We need to do it with the proper mindset. And we really have to revolutionize ourselves so that we can revolutionize the collective in a meaningful way. We have no choice at this point. We truly have entered into this Mayan apocalypse. Whether it was as was predicted in the Mayan calendar or not, if the timing is a little bit off, it clearly is happening. Consciousness is indeed reaching levels that are unprecedented. Yeah, if you take a ceiling that, the maximum dose of LSD and you keep taking it, it will just pass right through your body. You can only 2,500 mics or something. Yeah, it's definitely true. Um, in fact, there were a couple of cases where people consumed 20,000 micrograms or more. In one case, it was 5 people. Somebody busted out a baggie and they thought it was MDMA or cocaine or something and weren't really paying attention, I guess. And people did lines of pure crystal LSD. 1 liquid ounce of LSD is enough for 100,000 light strong doses and 300,000 light doses. So you can imagine a line of crystal LSD. They estimate that it was 20 to 50,000 mics each. They were all back to normal, back to baseline within 12 hours. And they actually checked on them 5 years later, and they were all fine. Not one of them had a flashback. None of them had any psychological issues. And so, this is one of the great glories of psychedelics is that it doesn't really matter how much you take or what kind of doses you take. If you're of sound mind, if you're not predisposed to mental illness, you will not go crazy. Period. End of story. That doesn't mean you should just eat a sheet every other day, but it is true. We're creeping up on an hour, so if you guys have any more questions, drop them. But I'm serious about this. Like, I'm not trying to be an ideological, you know what I mean? Like, we really have to take responsibility for this. We have to stop, people are really letting the propaganda get to them. And even the people that think they're outside of the matrix and have escaped, the mainstream narratives and all this stuff are still being led around by their noses. It's really painful for me to watch, Sure, the right wing has figured out all kinds of stuff that the left doesn't seem to understand, and they are still full of brainwashing and propaganda, the right. You know what I mean? They're still falling for it left and right. And the same is true of the left. It's like a mixed bag, and they throw this mixed bag down each side of the aisle, and then they've got everyone, deleting each other from their social media if they, you know what I mean? You guys know what I'm talking about. We have to do better. We have to do better. We have to look at the example left by someone like Terence McKenna and be humble and remember that we too are flawed. We probably don't possess the kind of IQ that he did, and we can still be completely convinced of things that are not true. We can delude ourselves, we can deceive ourselves, and so we must remember at all times that anything that we think could be complete bullshit. We have to be suspicious of not only the mainstream narrative, but also of alternative narratives. Saying of shoot for the moon and land in space, you must have to go past the goal. Good step in the right direction for those who want to. Yeah, you guys, join my Discord. The link, subscribe. If you want to join my Discord, I'll post the Discord in the subscriber community when I get back up to the house. So I guess at this point, I'm questions. I mean, you guys have heard, and Terence lied, deceived everyone, but he was also full of all kinds of awesome insights and changed the world for the better, and we just have to apply more critical thinking and scrutiny and skepticism and, become more and more intelligent and better versions of ourselves every single fucking day. Take conscious responsibility for your dopamine management. That's a huge thing. Do it. Find ways to put flow state triggers all throughout your day, every day of your life. Vanquish your demons. Constrain the ones that you cannot vanquish to your purposes. I don't have the Discord link available to me. I can't put it in the chat. Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. We have to transcend politics, first of all. It's got to become irrelevant, I see both the right and the left saying these like super irrational things that they believe about the other side, that, they want to, one of the best ways to test your beliefs is to ask the cui bono, who benefits? And it's so easy to invalidate false ideas just by asking that question. Especially when it comes to the kind of mudslinging that the political propaganda machine is orchestrating. Because that usually is the easiest way to, shine the light on these things. And do you think that what I said was right about that saying from my previous comment? Shooting at a quasar to land on Neptune or whatever. I mean, I'm sorry. It was like a paragraph. I only call it like a line. Did I ask you guys to hit the like button, share, subscribe, and support us by sending millions of dollars to our Zelle and PayPal? I also have I haven't put it in the descriptions for a while, but I have a store that I sell t-shirts with slogans like think for yourself, question authority, and all sorts of stuff. I haven't sold a single shirt ever. So you could be the first person that buys one of Illumignostic's. We were going to try to start a clothing line and call it Triclops gear for our illuminated Triclopses. All right, guys, I've got to go play guitar because I've been working really hard lately on brushing up my playing and really getting stuff together because I'm about to upgrade some equipment so I can start doing more professional quality streams with much better sound. There's maybe someone coming to the retreat who's talking about doing like a professional production of a performance. Are there more than one psychedelic used by the tribes? Hell yeah, there is. Yeah, there is. There's, different types of ayahuasca, different admixture plants. There are psychedelic mushrooms that are used by tribes. There's San Pedro, there's Apena, snuff, yopo, pinde, nadima, Right on, Sync Current. This plant I'm gonna try tomorrow. I don't know, what is it? A Fittonia, uh, Fittonia something, Brevinus yeah, there's tons. I mean, Chiric Sananga is another psychoactive ayahuasca admixture plant, kind of dangerous, Solanaceae, but it's psychoactive. It's used a lot. Bobensana, I think, is psychoactive when you mix it with other compounds, like when you put it in ayahuasca. It definitely changes the character of the experience. So yeah, you guys, come to the retreat. We only have 4 or 5 more slots open, and I probably won't. It's not something I'm going to do all the time for the rest of my life. So if you want to have this experience specifically with me, the spring is going to maybe be your last chance. At least, you know, when I come to the United States, I'll probably do something in California, maybe Colorado. But certainly to have this Amazon experience, and really, truly, all bullshitting aside, the Ngaru property is really crazy. It's, you know, with caverns and the vibrating spherical stone and tame wild animals around. It's just, it's ridiculous. So it's going to be a really great couple of months out there, and I hope to see every single one of you. Thank you so much for your support. You guys, when you spend this time with me, you could be doing anything else in the world, so it's extremely meaningful. I know how valuable your time is. Please take whatever message you are able to extract from this and apply it. You know, I hope that you get some utility from the things that I'm saying here. And it's true that we are entering into a time of upheaval and chaos, and it is up to us to construct something meaningful from the rubble. The universe is all of this inert potential just waiting for us to tell it what to do. So, you know, get to work.